The back cover acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we work, and we pay our respects to Indigenous elders past, present and emerging. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Div Pillay, welcome to the back cover. How are you?
Really good. I'm so glad to be in this conversation with you. As sort of a long time admirer of your work, and so glad that you're in the space. I follow women of color who take great strides. So you're one of them. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Div. And coming from you, that's such a huge compliment. I mean, obviously, you do incredible work, and I'm so inspired by it. So I appreciate your time today.
No problems.
Yeah.
I will also acknowledge, I'm on Wurundjeri land, Woiwurrung people, Kulin Nation. It's such a privilege to work on these lands and live on these lands. And I must say, one of the stark sort of reminders of the fact that the whole world doesn't know about the atrocities against First Nations people is a moment where I remember from South Africa receiving a VHS tape that sold the proposition of Australia, and nowhere on that tape was any story or narrative of First Nations people. So we just think how we don't admit the truth, and we don't want to look at uncomfortable truths, and we are very privileged to be on First Nations lands through the generosity and care of First Nations people for these lands. And so much respect to those listeners or people who are engaged in First Nations work as well, especially First Nations leaders.
Absolutely. That's beautifully said. And Div, for those who don't know, you are the CEO and co-founder of MindTribes and the powerhouse behind the 2025 Business in Colour Awards. I guess my first question, Div, is what prompted you to launch this awards show this year, and why is 2025 the right moment?
It's a good question that you asked, because actually we imagined these awards way back in 2019, and of course we were going for the brilliant sound of 2020, which we didn't know then was going to be our pandemic year. So we're kind of grateful that we didn't go with these awards then, but we had it all planned because we wanted, even back then, to celebrate and honor people of color who are making great strides in workplaces. And in a way, actually waiting 5 years was the right move, because I think 5 years ago, our racial literacy was even poorer than it is now. It was very hard to get race and cultural diversity work started in workplaces. And back then, we saw it as a way to encourage a business community to start if they hadn't started any anti-racism work, and continue if they had made some start. So back then, it was almost like a push to the business community to get engaged, whereas 5 years down the track now, it's actually beautifully a recognition of a lot of the private or public sector organizations who have worked with us or worked on their own with other partners to be able to further anti-racism work. So it's actually, waiting was a good move in a way. So thank you, COVID. But and the reason why is that there are no workplace anti-racism awards at all. So the awards market, if you can call it a market, and it is, there are so many gender equality awards, and just functional areas as well. You will have a woman in finance, a woman in procurement, woman in STEM awards, and generally addressing gender equality in those sectors. But there is a workplace awards for the LGBTIQA plus community. And there isn't anything for racially and ethnically diverse and First Nations people. Then I've judged many awards. So I am a National Telstra Business Judge, and it's been my 5th year judging the awards. I judged the Women's Gender Awards. I judged the Faculty Procurement Awards. And so I used my experience as a judge as a skill builder for myself to understand how big awards work and how sort of smaller awards work. And we built these awards with a lot of rigor, which I can talk to later. But it is about the objectivity of judging fairly, but also the biggest learning that I had was that First Nations people are often given one category. So in the big awards, there'll be a First Nations category that all First Nations people must go into a swim lane to. And I just think that's really wrong, because there are First Nations leaders who could do any category really. They could be a sponsor of change in our awards, they could be leading a project, they could be leading a chair of a network. They could really enter any category, and we didn't want to stereotype them into only one option, because we've got 5 categories. So we're really deliberate about the way the awards are built and structured to create fairness right from the get-go. So that was, a couple of reasons why it doesn't exist, because there's no awards for workplace awards for anti-racism. And I feel like sometimes anti-racism work gets a negative connotation. People are fearful of the work, whereas creating an awards and a celebration is almost like a counter to that. It's a counter to say, let's not shy away from the fact that racism needs to be addressed, like sexism needs to be addressed in the workplace. It's just another negative behavior. It is discriminatory. Let's see how we make progress with that, just like how we've made progress to address sexism in the workplace. So trying to normalize it into a piece of work that is credible, that people need to invest in, but a significant proportion of the workforce represented in that demographic, why not? So we started to be that kind of inaugural feel of we have to almost run these awards.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so true. I've noticed, when you look at places like America or, the UK, over there, it's sort of more commonplace to have these sort of, discussions around heavy topics like racism and sexism, discrimination. But in Australia, we tend to, like you said, shy away from it. So that's very true.
Absolutely.
What's the biggest blind spot you still see in corporate Australia when it comes to race and cultural equity?
I think the biggest blind spot is the need for data to make decisions. So the biggest, I suppose, maybe a bit of myth busting as well, is that if people often follow the gender equality making trajectory, so they want to know, for example, when the gender movement started in workplaces, it was all about the numbers. It was all about how many women do we have, where are they? Let's count them. And when we know that there's underrepresentation, we target representation first, right? So I think the issue of tackling First Nations representation, racially, ethnically diverse people's representation is far more complex and nuanced than just a simple count. It's hard to understand how people identify as well. So, people use in HR systems very rudimentary counts like CALD, culturally and linguistically diverse. Now, not many people may identify with that, and they may not tick a box for that. People have different religions, faiths, languages, the rich tapestry of race and ethnicity and First Nations or indigeneity. So it's hard to count. So that puts people off in terms of starting, because they feel like they need to have this number to be able to business case and justify the investment. And then there's this fear of what is racism, what isn't it? So people have a fear factor or discomfort about talking about the negative behavior of racism in the workplace, but more comfort talking about sexism in the workplace, because there's been just such an external and internal push. We have the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, we've got Gender Equality Acts here in Victoria. We've got big media moments, with the Grace team and Brittany Higgins causing a national dialogue on sexual harassment in the workplace. So it just gave us a stage to be able to force that conversation. So gender has seen some maturity, and we haven't seen the same maturity with racism at work. And we don't have, we have anti-discrimination laws, we don't have an act or an agency that specifically targets racism at work. And we've got Giri Sivaraman, our race commissioner, giving his National Press Club oration, which actually helps elevate the dialogue, but still there's no real positive duty created around racism. So we've got this, in a way, a perfect storm in that the awards is trying to address this from a success factors perspective. We're trying to get organizations who have started and continued to amplify these stories as a way to showcase good, what good looks like, or what progress looks like, to inspire that change rather than have it sit in this, oh, we don't have the data, we don't know, we can't start, or, oh, it's kind of hard to talk about racism and people are erring on the side of caution. Maybe we need to do anti-racism learning first before we even start to address anything. And all this time, people of color are just waiting. We're just waiting around for the equity to happen. So I feel like we're saying, okay, other organizations have gone already. Let's share those stories, and by a narrative storytelling approach and profiling what good looks like, maybe we incite some positive action. So we tried a different approach, I suppose. I don't know. Time will tell Mibengé whether this works or not. But we feel strongly that it might. Yeah.
Oh, I'm really excited about it. I think it's a fantastic idea. And just on that note, in terms of planning, how will you ensure that these awards recognize genuine impact and not just a polished PR story?
Oh, such a good question. And that is a very much coming to my very nerdy kind of evidence-based approach, objectivity approach. So what I've made sure through my learning as a judge over the last couple of years is to understand assessment, like how do people get fairly assessed? So while I won't be involved in any of the judging, so we've got 2 rounds of judges, preliminary judges and 20 formal judges to take a shortlist to a final winner and runner-up. We've got no say as a MindTribes team in what happens through that process, but what I've done is designed a rubric that assesses every question. So we've got 3 questions for people to answer and 1 referee to provide, and people can write in, or they can answer verbally and record themselves, or they can answer by video and record themselves. So just opening up the fairness and accessibility. Some people really have achieved a lot, but maybe are not comfortable writing. That writing and the influence through the written word is not coming through. Maybe there's another way that we can showcase their story in whether it's an audio file or a video file. We're open to that. And it's short, 3 questions. I've entered myself a couple of awards where, gosh, it takes me hours and hours to complete a submission, which I don't want to make it onerous for people as well. So we factor in that early engagement. How easy can we make it? But it needs to be substantive. It needs to carry some good evidence for judges to actually judge. And then it's about judging capability. And I think I've been wonderfully assumed to be great as a judge just by virtue of my resume and what I've done. But actually, I do think you can be a great leader, but you may not be able to be a good judge. What makes you a good judge? So I have built in a capability session with that design rubric to help judges understand, as a panel of judges, also how to work independently and score independently, and then how to work collectively to address their decision making. So that, for me, from a governance perspective, very important. But I will have nothing to do with that. I'm just training the judges, teaching them how to use the rubric, and then letting them go. And then I will, like you, see who the winners are on the night. But just that early sort of design process of how people nominate, submit, how fair, accessible it is, and then how objective that judging is, just ensures fairness, and also ensuring open and free access to First Nations people and racially ethnically diverse people and allies. So we have a sponsor category where we likely will have, really senior likely Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-European executives who've sponsored or made that business decision to apply as well. So we want to crowdsource those key stakeholders who really made anti-racism work in the workplace. So so that rigor in the design is very, very important. to me to make people feel like they've had a fair shot at being assessed.
Oh, absolutely. And lots to look forward to. What are you most looking forward to on the night?
I'm looking forward, one, very simply, for it actually to come together, because also we've going to do something just like it's myself and my team, but also as co-founders, my husband and I are fully vested in our business. So we've decided to go the non-traditional gala. And if you've been to gala awards, it's usually a lovely ballroom kind of affair, very Western in its dress and attire, and you have your lovely speeches, and then you have your entrees, mains, desserts, and you clap very nicely. Whereas we've decided to just throw that on its head from an ideas perspective. So if your audience can imagine, an open space, food trucks that represent all different types of ethnic food, young First Nations people and elders, really leading us at the start of the evening, and then African drummers and South Indian classical Bharatanatyam dancers, and showcasing the pride in which we carry our culture, and people having the ability to dress in whatever they want to dress in terms of ethnic attire. There's a strength and a beauty in cultural difference, different races and ethnicities, and sometimes we kind of norm to the Western view, and I often as a judge completely debunk that. I'll always wear my sari to a gala. When it says black dress, I go sari, and I often just wear it with pride, or always wear it with pride. So I feel like I'm most looking forward to seeing very different feel of a gala awards night coming together with the celebration of pride of cultures, and also a little bit of chaos. I don't like the orderly, clap, clap, clap. So there will be people moving safely to pick up their food from the food truck, coming back, having a chat. It's about community. Yeah. This awards is about community. And I feel sometimes at those very, tables of 10, you don't really know who else is in the room. So I'm looking forward to people connecting, and I'm also looking forward to the storytelling. So again, what I don't like about some awards is that you often only hear about the winner, and you just don't know the beautiful, amazing achievements of finalists and people who have really pushed hard. So what we want to do is make sure that in every category we showcase the stories and achievements of everybody, and then we announce the winner. And what we'll do, Sadhana Smiles and I co-host the Business in Color podcast, which is where the awards name was drawn. We'll make sure that all finalists get a spot to share their story, which is actually a big platform because we pay for that production of that podcast. So it's an important platform to share stories. So we'll make sure that amplifier effect gets out there. So I'm looking forward to the style. Hopefully our ideas come to bear, and I'm looking forward to the accomplishments and sharing in a community fashion stories for good.
Yeah, certainly. Div, Australia's made a lot of strides when it comes to race and cultural equity at work, but there's still a long way to go. What's your hope for the awards and for race and cultural equity work in Australia?
Well, firstly, I'm going to be cheeky and say I don't think there's actually been strides yet. I wouldn't call it strides. There's been attempts, good attempts, very good attempts, and there's some good attempts that will be showcased. But we still haven't moved bravely to targets at all. In some workplaces we have seen some First Nations targets, but those targets are set very much as a whole of workforce target. So if you get 3% First Nations representation target, often it's filled very much at the lower level, or it's filled in people who are out in field work, or in highly identified roles like First Nations roles, so serving communities, as opposed to leadership roles, for example. So So I feel like the target is selectively applied and still doesn't make social equity in how much someone would earn, where would they be, what kind of jobs would they do. And we call it occupational segregation, like people are hyper represented in certain types of roles. So same with racially, ethnically diverse people, they are definitely in certain types of roles, not dispersed across a workforce. So we need that equality everywhere, and we haven't yet reached target. So I do feel like we've started something.
Yeah.
But it isn't anywhere near a maturity level. And we don't have good measurements of progress in place. And so targets being one of them, but the other piece being we don't have enough people reporting racism at work. So we have seen by the movement of the gender equality making in this country, we actually see a higher reporting rate of sexism, sexual misconduct at work. We see those rates rising, right? So which is good, because if we can report it, we can address it, right? And we have the legislation with respect at work doing positive duty. So organizations have to report what they're proactively doing to prevent sexual harassment at work. Whereas we don't have that authorizing environment for racism, and we don't have the metric as well. And just because people don't report it doesn't mean it doesn't occur, right? So there's a safety issue, a cultural safety issue about how someone would even think to report it and what they fear as a consequence of reporting it as well. So there's a lot of progress to be made. I want to share that racism is a psychosocial hazard. It is, right? It's a harmful behavior that impacts someone's psychological and cultural safety at work, just like how sexism does, just like how ableism does, and it's the same negative sort of connotation. So we have to deal with it the same. So I'm fighting for the equality of what it means to experience racism at work, and the disproportionate impact that it has on people of color, because you and I can experience both sexism and racism at work, right? We can experience both negative behaviors and the compounding impact of that. So it's so important for these awards to really cause a stir in people's understanding of what they can actually do, what they can use from gender equality making, but what is quite different and unique about racism at work. So I'm hoping that really comes through. But yeah, I'm going to be cheeky and say, I don't think we have made strides. Like I would love to be do an interview with me 10 years down the track and I'll tell you if we made strides.
Find when you go into these corporate spaces and essentially try and help them improve the work culture, are they generally receptive in terms of like the corporate leaders? Are they receptive to it? Are they, is there resistance? How are you normally met?
I love the word resistance, and currently with an academic at Monash University, we're writing a paper on resistance.
Oh, wow.
Because it's a very interesting thing to uncover, because the resistance, especially to racism at a board and executive level or CEO, exec management level, comes in very different forms. It comes in a delaying tactic. So not yet, not now. We don't know enough. It comes in a dismiss tactic, actually making a decision not to do this now. It's not prioritizing it. Yet we see 15 to 24% of racially ethnically diverse people in workforces, and up to maybe 1 to 2% of First Nations people in workforces. So we're kind of saying no to maybe up to 30% of people, right? So, no, not now. And so delay, dismiss, or sort of really rationalizing why it's like unimportant right now in the business context of the other things. So I think that we faced resistance, not overtly, but very covertly. And when I'm there pitching, often my time is limited. I've got maybe 15 to 20 minutes to turn what I've heard from racism listening and recommendations into a yes. That's very, very hard to do in 15 minutes when generally I may have maybe one executive who's a person of color in the room, if that. So I have, and I'm not also saying that this person would have any lived experience of racism. Just because they are people of color doesn't mean they have lived experience of racism. So sometimes I don't have any allies in the room to give the work some voice. And so it's easy to dismiss. So I think that it's still very, very difficult because, like I said earlier, people are wanting numbers, evidence.
Yeah.
Usually the thing that's working is a risk lens. So I put a risk lens on it, and I put a risk lens with a time on it. And I go, if you do nothing today, here's the risk severity. Here's what might happen in a month's time, in a year's time. And so you have an opportunity, and I use the same language from our legislation to say that you can act now with preventing this from happening to anyone else, or you can make a decision today not to do anything, and here's the risk of doing nothing. Here's what might happen. And I have to leave it as a supply partner to that board and executive team. It is their ethical radar and judgment. And I can provide the slickest pack and the best influencing pitch in 15 minutes, but at the end of the day, it's their decision. And I'm proud to say in the last sort of 13 years that we've been operating, a lot of our no's, not yet's have been converted eventually over time to yeses. So we've got a body of work, private and public sector, that really has come forward. So we want to celebrate that, the fact that people may have dismissed it maybe 10 years ago, but didn't in the subsequent years. They moved the dial. So that's good news, I suppose. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, I'm so thankful to you and the team at MindTribes for all of the fantastic work that you do. Even though it's baby steps, hopefully in due course we will have more significant change. So I thank you.
Thanks so much, Mibengé. You are wonderful in terms of leading this discussion with me. It's a hard topic, I know, but you've done beautifully well with your questions. And hopefully we see you and others in your industry come to our awards.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much, Div. Have a great day.